What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Detroit Lions podcast here with Bischoff and Brown. This is Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. We are back after another Lions victory over the Los Angeles Chargers. Great win. It was phenomenal to go to 7-2. Scott, my man, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. It's a Wednesday evening. I'm ready. I've been excited to do this show since Sunday night. I'd love to do a live recap sometime. Maybe we can get the keys to the car to do that at some point. That'd be a lot of fun, just simply because it's just so great to talk about it when it's fresh. But I like also the kind of the buffer of a few days because we're film junkies and we get an opportunity to kind of dive in a little bit, as we were talking pre-show, trying to fix this defense a little bit. So that'll be kind of an emphasis of today's show. But we do want to start right with the recap of the Chargers. Lions win 41-38. They've got the second best record in the NFC, one of the best records in the NFL. Second best offense in the NFL as far as total yards per game. Just phenomenal, but big game, big win. Definitely a nail biter. They were up 17-3 at one point. It kind of felt like they had it in the bag early, just simply because of the way that they were playing. And it obviously ended up being a lot closer, but initial thoughts here, or kind of a few days to stew on it. What was your thoughts on this game and how do you feel after the win?
So, I think it's something that we should all be happy. Obviously, we restart because that's about the dumbest thing you could say. Anytime you can bust off a 75-yard run with your power back in the way they made that look with Jameson getting in front of that and Khalif Raymond doing all that stuff, it's just like it is such a ridiculous thing to watch. So you had that going on. You had Gibbs looking like, pretty electric player. Clearly a very different player than I think a lot of people thought, as a gimmick and a third down pass catching weapon kind of a player. Clearly not that. He can run it between the tackles. He's a very good player. And then some of the creative, the stuff they did with Amon-Ra. I think the thing that I took away from the whole thing was just how aggressive Campbell was, but also how self-aware he is at times. And it doesn't mean he's not going to make mistakes, but in this particular situation, you're 6-2, you travel out to the West Coast, you have the ball, what was it, around the 25-yard line or so with 2 minutes left in the game, just after the 2-minute warning. And it's fourth and whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And you think to yourself, kick the field goal. And the problem there is that if you do that, you give the ball back to the Chargers. And I think most coaches would have taken the field goal there.
Mm-hmm.
And he has the self-awareness and the understanding of we've done this in the past and it's burned us. So we are not going to kick the field goal. We're going to go for it on fourth down. I trust my guys to get this first down. And then the game is over. And just witnessing all that stuff and seeing it all get executed the way it got executed, that was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just how impressive it was a showing on offense and coach. And then nothing is perfect, but all of that stuff, offensively, the decision making, obviously you'd love to you want to get points every time you're in the red zone. So going forward on fourth, it was a weird possession in the first half where they went for it and they ended up firing the ball into like the fifth row on fourth down.
Yeah,
that was a weird possession, but if you're going to be aggressive, you got to be aggressive. And I just think that looking at that decision, especially the one late in the fourth quarter, it was awesome. It was great. What did you take away from the defense? We're going to talk about. So
yeah,
but what did you take away from the offense and some of the decisions that were made?
Yeah, starting with the decision, I'm normally a pretty conservative person when it comes to the play calling side, but when they threw the ball out of bounds or towards the sideline on the out route to St. Brown, I knew that they were going for it because the clock had stopped, and I knew Dan Campbell understood the situation of the game. Like, I can't give the ball back to them with timeouts. I can't do any of that. Like, I have to put the pressure on Staley and that coaching staff. And knowing the history of that coaching staff, he knows in the back of his mind that they've made mistakes as far as coaches go and players. So I think he put the trust in not just his offense, but in his defense to potentially come up with the football again or make a stop there if they weren't to get it. But I love that he's always swinging for the fences. If he's going to go down, he's going to go down swinging. And that's exactly who he is. He's talked about that from the very beginning. That's the identity of this football team. That's who he is. And I love the decision. And I'll be honest, when they went to kick the field goal, I thought it was going to get blocked. I thought it was going to be a bad snap. I like the way the camera view was, it was like, oh my God, this is going to happen to us. And fortunately it didn't. But yeah, you mentioned the 75-yard run. I think it was a phenomenal run for simply what Jameson Williams did in that run, because had he not stepped up and been a team guy, if he would have been the diva receiver that some guys are in this league, he would have let all of that happen downfield, and it would have been a 45-yard run rather than a 75-yard run. So I think it's great. The offensive line came out today as far as Pro Football Focus, number 1 ranked offensive line in football. I had a film piece today that dropped on the Lions offensive line, some of their best run blocks for the Lions wire. And it's true, man. I mean, they are such a good unit up front. These running backs are getting 2 to 3 yards per carry before they're even getting touched. And a lot of that is because of Jonah Jackson coming back. Yeah. Because of Frank Ragnow being back. Obviously, the consistency that we see from Sewell and Decker, but the underrated player offensively all year has been Graham Glasgow at right guard. And he has been such a great one-year signing for them, a veteran piece up front. There's a run, I'm trying to remember who had the football. I want to say Gibbs had it. And, I'm sorry, no, it was the 4th and 5 trap play with Montgomery. Yeah. And he is in his stance and he flashes to, and this is in the article, but he flashes to the 3 technique that's in his outside shoulder. He flashes like he's going to block him and then quickly gets up to the second level, seals off the linebacker. Jackson does a great job sealing off the tackle that crashes inside, and it creates this rushing lane where Montgomery was untouched on a trap play for 4 to 5 yards, where that's all he needed was 4 or 5 yards. And he ended up getting 6 or 7, and it was a first down. And it's just like those little details and technique that this team has up front makes them so good and consistent. And that's why they can put up 41 on the road against the Chargers football team that has Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa and some of the players that they have defensively. Meanwhile, I think that's why we look at it and say, we can play with anybody because of this unit up front offensively and really defensively, because defensively, they do a great job in stopping the run. And that was something we talked about last week with this game in the preview, is just simply, we weren't concerned about the running attack of Austin Eckler and what the Chargers had, because we knew we were going to stop it. But no, I feel good. I think it was a good win. We knew it was going to be a tough game. If we look back at the episodes that we've done, we've talked about a couple of trap games already. We felt like if there was any trap game on the schedule, this probably was one of them. I don't know what's next. Maybe the Broncos is a trap game potentially, but I don't know. I'm not going to look that far ahead. This just felt like a game that if they lose, is it, I don't want to say same old Lions, but is this a different Lions team coming out of the bye? And they didn't look like it. They looked like an even better football team coming out of their bye week. So it was a great win. Like we said, 7-2, 41-38. You'll love to see it. Jared Goff, David Montgomery, just everybody played so well. And I got to give credit to Khalif Raymond too, setting up that big catch on in the fourth quarter on the last drive of the game, 40-yard catch. He is so fast. Yeah, so fast. And I think the way that he gets utilized is the way that I think people want to start seeing Jameson Williams get utilized, because Raymond he should see the field more. And it seems like they let everybody else do the dirty work, get kind of tired out, and then they just bring the speedster in and he just blows by everybody. I don't know if that's the mindset, but I love that play call, and I love that player. I think he is such a fun player for this team.
And the misdirection of that play was just filthy. You know, you set, it's one of those things where I think you set up that kind of a play for a few quarters.
Mm-hmm.
This is the look we're going to give you. We're going to motion, whatever it is. We're going to hit it and hit it and hit it. And when we really need it with 4 minutes left in the game, the banana and the tailpipe kind of dealio, and boom, things change quickly. There was just a lot of that in this game where on offense, there was so much that you thought, wow, it's awesome.
Yeah. Dude, they had five. It doesn't get talked about. 533 total yards of offense for the Lions. Like, I don't know the last time I've seen that. And this is consecutive weeks now, 200 plus rushing yards for this offense. And I don't know the last time I saw that. Barry Sanders? I mean, honestly, Barry Sanders. I don't.
Possibly Joique Bell and Reggie Bush maybe together at a point. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. Not sure.
I just know at one point when Matt Stafford was the quarterback of this team throughout his 10 years in the organization, at one point at the 10-year mark, they only had 7 games. At this point, he had played 80 or 90 games. They only had 7 games of a 100-yard rusher, and here they are consecutive weeks with 200 yards. And it's just it's a completely different football team and we talk about it every week. It's a different team than what we've seen in years past and really maybe in our lifetime. And it's a great feeling, and I'm just trying to enjoy every minute of it, which is why I love doing this show and everything that we get to do with it, because it's been great. But I say, what
are we? We're 10 weeks in, and there are multiple games where you've had David Montgomery, of all people, who people accuse of being slow, all this other whatever. Montgomery busted off these huge runs where it's they just scored on a 75-yard run.
Yeah.
It's kind of unheard of, what they're doing is pretty remarkable on offense. It really is. Yeah. Offense playing great.
Yeah. And Montgomery's hit 100 plus yards rushing 3 times this year. He's been banged up. He's only played in 6 games, but he's good for a touchdown a game. He's good for 4 or 5 yards a pop. He runs hard.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, a guy that it was claimed as not fast, really kind of like a broken back. And boy, has he rejuvenated himself. It just seems like every running back that comes in here, they rejuvenate themselves. First,
do you remember the gnashing of the teeth, so to speak, about him and Jamal Williams?
Yeah.
I was no, this is a serious upgrade from what they've had in the past.
Yeah.
And he's going to tear it up in this offense, and he has.
Yeah. And when you watched him from the Bears, it was just he was a good player for them. They just didn't have an offensive line, and they didn't have the consistency at the quarterback position, where Jared Goff's been incredibly consistent as a quarterback. And we talk about this a lot with draft prospects, right? Technically sound, and he's got a good base. He's got, he's consistently throwing on a good platform, or, this defensive end is always working his hands, so on and so forth. But with Jared Goff, there is never a throw that I can really look at and be like, wow, he had terrible form. He had a terrible base. His throwing motion is out of whack. Everything he does is so controlled, and it's almost like he's throwing in a phone booth. He can just sit there and everything's tight and he's good. And you go to the Saints game and Jameis Winston comes in, and I'm not even kidding you. There is a throw that I have on my Twitter because Josh Norris of Underdog Fantasy had a clip of it. His base, Jameis Winston's base, is 1.5 yards long from where his back foot is to where his stride foot is. And it is just oh my God. I watch the Lions every week in depth, and it's I don't see that with Jared Goff. I don't see that with this offense. I don't see these mistakes that other teams have offensively. And it is such a breath of fresh air, because I feel for much of my life, probably your life, it just over the last several years, because of how bad it was man, this team is almost unwatchable. And now it's there's so much good coming out of it, especially offensively. It's been great.
Yeah.
But as for the defensive side, there's been some struggles, and we know there's been some struggles. Against the Chargers, they gave up 420 yards of offense. They gave up obviously 38 points. And it really was a kind of a back and forth game despite a strong start from the defense. The defense had some pressure early. They forced a couple of punts, had an interception. But the defense is struggling. And whether it's the pass rush, whether it's the coverage scheme, there's ways to fix it. I mean, from your observation, what do you think is wrong? What do you think we need to fix here? Is it Aaron Glenn? Is it the players? What is it?
It's a great question.
Our question.
Yeah, I mean, but it's generalized. I wonder if there's a generalized cuteness to what they're doing, in a way to manufacture pressure because they're not necessarily getting there in a traditional way.
Yeah.
Last year, they didn't do this early in the season either. And then something switched. Last year, what it seemed that they did to free Hutchinson was to allow him to get up into a 2-point stance and to line him up a little bit wider and to give him different angles to attack. This seems more team pervasive than just trying to get one guy going, though. So I wonder, if Hutchinson's not giving you a bunch of pressures, or if he's has a rough matchup, whatever it is, you're not going to generate much pressure. So how do you then try to disrupt timing and make it uncomfortable for a quarterback? They didn't blitz a lot, right? So there's a reason why I think they didn't blitz, because they needed everybody. They needed as much in the back end as they could get. But then they made things, I think, a little more difficult on themselves by I mean, I don't know what you think, but like the idea of allowing Keenan Allen to run manned up routes against anybody, I think is a losing proposition. Mm-hmm. If you give the quarterback enough time to find him. I just don't know how you cover him. So I think it would have been simple just to say, let's bracket him and ask Quentin Johnston and Gerald Everett, guys like that, to beat you.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't seem to want to do that. I don't know if they are doing too much on defense. You know what I mean? Like, are there too many formations, too many alignments, too much stuff that they have to communicate amongst themselves? And that's tough, especially under pressure, under stress, when you're trying to deal with a guy like Keenan Allen.
Right.
And then no pressure and all the time that you're giving him, he's going to pick you apart. So I've talked for a little while about things that I think I don't know how to fix it other than just being more aggressive. So simplifying things in the back end and being much more aggressive up front and not playing so much contain, but just go.
Right.
And I'm curious where you are with it, because it's not a simple thing, whatever it is. It's not simple.
No, and I think if we had the right answer, the correct answers for it, I don't think we'd be sitting here on a podcast talking about it. I think we'd be sitting in some locker room somewhere, drawing it up. But I think you're right. I think the consistency of always trying to contain is there, and they just need to stop doing that. They need to become more aggressive off the edge. And I even think it's with Hutchinson, like, there's times when you watch him that it feels like when he's in his pass rush, he's thinking. And a pass rusher doesn't need to think. He needs to do one thing: go get the quarterback. You're pass rushing. Yeah. And I would watch these guys rush against the Chargers, and Herbert's he's an athlete. He's a great quarterback. He has all the tools to be elite, but I would have forced him to get into the toolbox and become elite against me with the arm by sending as much pressure as I could. And if he beat me over the top on a deep route, so be it. Okay, I now go from a single high safety to a 2 high shell. I don't send 5, I now send 4. Or I don't send 6, I send 5. And I think they're trying to mix and match that stuff. And you brought it up. There was one, the clip I sent earlier via text between us. Charles Harris was lined up as the nose tackle. And it's like, that's fine. That's been a common trend in the NFL right now. TJ Watt's doing it for the Steelers. Myles Garrett is doing it. Teams are trying to get speed on the interior because they're getting one-on-one with centers who have, normally they're shorter, they're more stout, they've got shorter arms. And their speed, they're just not able to pick their heads up fast enough to get to those edge rushers, which it makes sense. But to be honest, Charles Harris has lost a step. He is not as fast as he once was. And if there's anybody that's going to have some speed up there, it's going to be Hutch. And Hutch has done it earlier in the year, but for whatever reason in this particular game, they spent a lot of time dropping Hutch into coverage. And I don't know if that's like foreshadowing for the future of maybe this week against the Bears where he can pick off Justin Fields again. But there was one where he was close, and had he has continued getting depth, he would have had it. I think that's the big thing is there's guys that are just overthinking. There's a lot of trust in guys like Jack Campbell and Brian Branch who are, they're 9 games into their NFL careers, and it's hard to be elite as a rookie 9 games into your career when you're playing against a very good quarterback in Justin Herbert. But also, they're the new guys on the job. And I can't speak for anybody else, but I know that when I was, a new guy in my profession and the new guy at my job, I never wanted to make a mistake. I didn't want to be that guy, the new guy that made a mistake. So you work timidly and you end up making mistakes. And I think that happens from time to time in the NFL when you have 2 to 3 seconds to make a decision. Am I going left? Am I going right? How much depth do I got to get? So I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but I think just schematically, they've got to find a good blend between zone coverage and man coverage. And it just, when you're playing chess, this is what this is. And there are times when Aaron Glenn calls man coverage and he gets beat. And there's times he calls zone and he gets beat. And there's zone beaters in these routes that he can't do. And the Chargers won quite a bit with a lot of mesh. They would use Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen, and they would, run those crossers in the shallow cross areas. And I think that was something that, if they can find a way to fix that with more zone coverage, okay, those mesh routes aren't there. And now you got pressure. But they just continuously ran man on it, and that's when they were getting beat. And I don't know, a guy like Herbert, he got in rhythm. And
so that's the thing is they went up against a guy who got hot, and Keenan Allen's a tough matchup. It doesn't matter who's covering him. That's tough. It's a tough assignment. And, can we just chalk it up to the Chargers having a really, really good day on offense? Maybe, the Lions were able to overcome it in the end. So, definitely a little alarmed about what feels like a multiple week or longer sort of drought that the defense is in, and yet still walking away from these games winning. It's huge. It's super important, while recognizing they got to figure out a way to make it work a little more efficiently and effectively than it has been. Because you just can't line up and say, all right, we're going to do exactly what we've been doing. Well, you gave up 38 points. Yeah. And, like the throw that Herbert makes to Keenan Allen, where Jerry Jacobs is a bit in trail coverage. And it's just such a ridiculous route. It's a touchdown. And, when you look at where Jacobs was in that coverage, and he was pretty tight in coverage, but where the ball was placed, like you could have walked down the field and just reached it out and put it on Keenan Allen's front shoulder. And that's exactly where it would have had to go. And Herbert was able to put it there. Hey, sometimes it's like, congratulations, nice play. Great throw, great route.
Well, and the same thing with Jalen Guyton. He scores his first touchdown since 2021. And Herbert throws it on a rope. And Kirby Joseph was there, but he was a half a step late. And I think part of it was misalignment. I think, I mean, call me crazy, but if I got a single high safety and I got trips to my left or my right, I'm going to probably shade over to that trip side, and I'm going to let my corner on the single receiver side maybe just play a little bit more off man coverage or just man that guy up. And he was on the, to the defensive side, he was on the right hash. and he was coming across the field to the left hash where Guyton was up on the seam. And Herbert fires that one in there, and it looked like Joseph was going to play the ball, and then at the very last second took his eyes off the ball and played the receiver, and it ended up fitting in there. So
yeah,
it's like, it kind of goes back to my point pre-show of in via text is like, Dan Campbell said it on Monday. We got to fix some things fundamentally. I think that's what he's referring to. Things like that, getting aligned correctly, playing the football, don't worry about the guy. Those are the fundamentals that I think we're talking about, or that he's talking about, and I think that's important. So I think they'll get there. I really do. I think they need Chauncey Gardner-Johnson back. I'm very intrigued with Bruce Irvin. I mean, I don't think he's going to be a guy that comes in and gets you 10 sacks down the stretch here, but I think his speed is a difference maker. And I think it tells you everything you need to know about James Houston. He's not coming back. So
yeah, and if he does, it's going to be really late, right? And then you just don't know. It's been such a long time. How quickly can he get back into shape? And you know what I mean? Like there's too much wild card there to really have any vibes of being able to, you know, rely upon him coming back. So I'm with you. You know, Irvin to me is going to be sort of like a situational pass rusher type.
Yep.
Whatever he gives them is gravy. You know, we'll see.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And yeah, even if that means he's playing 10 to 15 snaps a game, so be it. I think it's an upgrade over Romeo Quora. I think that guy's shot. I think he's done. He's not really able to move the way that he used to. Yeah. And that's the other thing. I mean, there's so much relying on Aiden Hutchinson. Isaiah Buggs is just purely a power rusher. Benito Jones, the same type of deal. John Kaminsky can flash here and there. But Julian Okwara had a really nice pass rush. It was the 3rd and 11 where he got called for, I don't know, illegal hands to the face or whatever it was that he got called on Herbert.
Yeah.
And it was a great pass rush by him. Yeah. I mean, he hit a swim move and then had a little bit of speed to power there. And it was great. But yeah, I mean, they can fix it. They just got to simplify things. It just is what it is. And again, I think figuring out that balance between man and zone coverage, and maybe it's more too high safety stuff, and putting the trust in, you know, Barnes and Campbell and Anzalone and maybe even Brian Branch down in the box. But I think Walker and Joseph, they need to stay back. I don't think they need to come up as much as they do.
So that's where I think Kirby Joseph would tear it up. I really do. As reading the eyes of the quarterback and making plays on the ball. And I think sometimes getting cute as opposed to just dialing up things that you know would work is detrimental. Mm-hmm. Where I think if you did play something as generic as a cover 2 with, you know, 2 high safeties, Kirby Joseph being one of them, you let Branch play in the box. You know what I mean? Like that's just like generally how you run your defense. It's a much simpler way to do things. Yeah, I'm sure there are significant limitations to doing that. So that's the balance, is what does it give you as opposed to what do you lose? I do think that there are elements of it's a little overly complicated, and the amount of communication that they have to do to rely upon one another to know exactly what's happening potentially is problematic. You know, instead of just like you mentioned, you can't think and play fast. You just can't. It's impossible. It's got to go. Yep. So that's it in a nutshell. I think, you know, and everywhere on the defenses, you want them to play a little faster and just to be a little more aggressive in getting to the quarterback. Obviously, it's pretty easy. You know, if you get to the quarterback or make the quarterback uncomfortable a little quicker, makes the job of everybody in the back end a little easier.
Right.
So I think that's what we're both seeing and feeling is we would just want them to go get it. You know, right. Quit messing around and widening and playing contain and all this other stuff and just go.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I mean, we'll see what happens this week. I mean, we got the Bears and we move on. I mean, we beat the Chargers.
Let's talk about playing contain this week.
Right. We talk about getting rid of contain, and we're probably going to have to do a little bit more contain because Justin Fields, quarterback of the Bears, is expected back. He had an injury to his thumb on his throwing hand. We'll see what he does as far as a passer. I think there's still going to be some limitations in it. But he's been off.
Wasn't there before?
Well, that's the whole thing. He was limited before.
What an arrogant douchebag. I shouldn't have said that, because you know what's going to happen. He's gonna make some throws that are just ridiculous this week, and I'm going to blame myself. I'm going to have a long look in the mirror at that comment right there.
Yep. So that's going to get clipped, and that's going to be on Bears Twitter and Facebook everywhere, and it's your fault.
Whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, so Fields is back, and the Lions, they should be worried. I mean, that's the main question here. Should the Lions be worried? Are the fans worried? I mean, we would love to know. Are you worried about Justin Fields? Let us know in the comments below here on the Detroit Lions podcast on YouTube, as well as on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your podcast platforms. But yeah, I mean, you should be a little bit worried. I mean, they played them last year. It was a tight game. One of the games was 31-30. And then the other game was 41-10. The Lions absolutely, trounced on them. But I think it's one of those where, maybe Fields provides a spark to an offense and to a team that really needs the spark right now, because their season's done. I mean, they're done.
Yeah.
But I think that's really where the worry comes from. Is this is probably it for Fields this stretch coming up. I mean, they could very well shut him down if his hand is not right. In another 2, maybe 3 weeks. By December 1st, second week of December, it could be Fields done, and they're shooting for the number 1 overall pick to figure out if Caleb Williams or Drake May.
It's possible, and you would understand it completely. I do think that from a Lions fan standpoint, being at home and being able to get loud and keep them a little bit like what it looked like on the road, as opposed to being at home last year, where he looked rattled in that game. This is definitely one of those, get after him, but understand that he is going to run with the ball. Historically, or at least in the last several years, I think, to be fair to what this Lions team is, running quarterbacks have really hurt them. But I think you just take that. Like, all right, you got to look at these long runs as almost like long passing plays with Fields. So you expect that you're going to give up a few of those, and that's okay. You're going to get some turnover-worthy plays. That's coming too. And if you get pressure on him, he's a different player. Where, and I know they have DJ Moore now. They didn't have him last year, but it's still, you feel pretty comfortable with what you're doing, both offensively and defensively, that at home, with where both teams are right now, you don't feel like threatened. While understanding that you do need to respect Justin Fields and his ability to do just about everything as a quarterback. It's just, can he consistently do that for 4 quarters and beat you for 4 quarters? And I don't know that he can. He is going to make some huge plays. You just got to accept it. It's just how it is.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, there's probably been, over the last year and a half, 2 years, there's probably been no quarterback as mobile as him, and that has given the Lions a harder time as far as trying to contain him and prevent him from running around. I mean, last year in both games, he had over 100 plus yards in both games, even though they lost. But he struggled as a passer. I mean, last season, he only completed, 52% of his passes against us. So, that's the key. I think if they can shut that down, he can run around. That's fine. I mean, the Lions run the football just fine, and the Lions are going to be able to throw it around. And
yeah,
I think it's one of those things where, as we preview this game, the Bears are getting healthy. Nate Davis should be back. He's going to move to right guard. Tevin Jenkins is going to move to left guard. They got Braxton Jones at left tackle, and then they've got the kid. Yeah.
Right.
Darnell Wright.
Tight end.
Yeah. He's at right tackle. So they're okay up front, but again, I'm not overly worried about it because, again, I think the hand is going to be limited. I think it's one of those where they know it's a division game. They're going to try to play spoiler, and it feels very Matt Stafford rushing back type thing that we've seen in the past with his hand and those types of things. And I'm not overly concerned. I think it's a big game for J-Mo. Dan Campbell came out today and talking about how J-Mo is really earning his keep. And I think when he says stuff like that, I think that means you start putting a game plan together to get him more touches. And I'll be honest, this is now back-to-back weeks where Jared Goff missed Jameson Williams wide open.
Yeah. Yeah, and they tried. I mean, they got the ball to him, and he scored last week. It was a phantom, ridiculous call, but
what is this call? What does this even mean? I don't even understand it.
So I think they viewed the defender as still being inside the tackle box, and you can't cut block him.
So why are running backs allowed to cut a linebacker that's blitzing?
No idea. No.
It's an asinine call.
Whatever. I don't know. I'm
just a guy on a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answer there is. Like that seemed to be what they were trying to intimate that the call was.
Yeah,
was that he was still. I mean, it wasn't like a chop block kind of thing because it was just Decker. I don't even know if Decker touched it, but it was still. So I mean, they're trying to get JMO involved.
Yeah.
We have talked about this repeatedly. Jameson is still engaged. And when he stops being engaged, I think then you can say, okay, the alarm bells are out, right, or up. It would be great to get him going and get him, doing super exciting stuff. It feels like so I think it's a disservice for us to come up here and talk every week about a game and call it like a trap game, which we have done in some ways. Right. But understand where that's coming from is that there's respect for everybody you play, and every team you play that's an NFL offense. Yeah, right. And they have highly paid defensive players on that defense, so it's not like this is just a pushover. Now, having said that, the Lions should be in a really good position, and aside from the few big plays that you're going to give up. As long as the Lions play a reasonably, a good football game, and they execute, they should be fine in this matchup at home. They should be, but I'd love to see Jameson Williams get more synced up, and I think that's what Campbell is talking about today when he talks about him feeling like he's a part of this. Yeah, is all right. They're starting to develop some rapport and some understanding together where each of them need to be to help each other. I hope that's the case, because if that's the case, this offense is going to go from a really good offense to, I don't want to even, you don't want to say that you might be the best offense in the NFL with this offensive line and the way they run the ball, and Amon-Ra and Jameson going, good Lord.
Yeah. Well, and that's something we've talked about. I think it's, you go back a couple weeks ago, I talked about Goff missing JMO on a throw, and I think it was more so just the conversation of, he's just not there. They're not in sync yet. And I hope they're there. I hope they're getting very close, because, again, there was a deep over route. JMO's wide open, and for whatever reason, Goff is staring down the fade route from St. Brown, because St. Brown's running the clearing pattern, and he's wide open, and he double clutches, and then he throws it to him late. He ends up completing it, but it could have been a touch.
Been open on an over route, though.
He's been open every time.
You cannot cover that with one guy.
No,
you can't. It's just too fast for that.
Yeah, and I think that's where it all kind of comes into play. Is like, the Lions are going to scheme things up perfectly, and they're going to get the playmakers the football. Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds, Sam Laporte. I mean, you just go down the list. We haven't even seen anything from Peoples-Jones yet. And who knows? I mean, that's another guy that's going to potentially add the same type of piece that we've been maybe missing as well. So, I hope he plays.
I mean, I don't know what anybody else thinks, but to me, the only place where I could say that the Lions offense has been lacking is in the red zone. Let's score more touchdowns in the red zone. But that's about it. You can't really knock them for anything else.
Yeah, and I thought the play call in the Chargers game, when they were down there near the one, just running it, and then on 4th and goal, you run the pass. Just keep running the football. Yes. Just tell your guys, look, it's 4th and goal. We need to hit this. And I think they would have done it. I think not using a fullback as consistent. I mean, bring in Dan Skipper. Put Penei Sewell back there and put Dan Skipper at right tackle. I don't care what you do. Figure it out that way. Put Brock Wright at right tackle and put freaking Sewell back there. Figure that part out and you will be way better off for it as a football team. And I don't know. I think that's some things that the Lions should do. But yeah, this game, I'm not overly concerned just because I think the Bears are better than they were last year record-wise. It already kind of shows they've matched the win total from a season ago. Yeah. But at the same time,
danger for sure. Like sprinkled around that entire roster is a more dangerous unit for sure.
Yeah, but I think they lack the consistency and they've not been healthy. And I think at the end of the day, the Lions are just a better football team. They're better coached and they're a more in sync football team at this point in time. Justin Fields coming back is great, but it's hard for a quarterback to get back into the rhythm in his first game being against Detroit on the road in Detroit. Like that's going to be a tough game.
It is a tough task. It really is.
Yeah, and he's already struggled before. So I think it's one of those where you're asking for him to do a lot in his return against one of the better football teams in football. But we'll see. I mean, maybe I'm eating crow next week, which we'll figure out next week.
How we're going to do alone.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how we do next week's show. I mean, we'll have a Packers preview. I think we just got to figure that out because of the holiday.
Yeah.
But we'll figure that all out. But I don't know. I don't have anything else. I don't know if you want to add anything. I'm good.
We're good.
Yeah. No, we're good. It was a great show. Look, Lions are 7-2. There's nothing to be upset about. They are back into the national media eye as a Super Bowl contender. And when you look at records, as far as best teams in the NFL, it's the two teams that were in the Super Bowl and the Lions. I mean, it's remarkable. The Chiefs, the Eagles, and the Lions.
Good.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
You guys can follow us on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft, at Bischoff_Scott. You guys, of course, you need to rate, review, and subscribe to the Detroit Lions podcast here on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Lions are 7-2. We got the Bears coming up. We're excited. We appreciate all the support, all the commentary. So reach out to us, keep engaging, keep talking to us. We love it. Scott, you got anything else?
Nope, we're good. You guys have a great week.
Yeah, he's Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. This is the Detroit Lions podcast with Bischoff and Brown.